Notice, the Eastern Empire has spent 350 years preparing for war.
After Veldora burned their invasion force to ash, the Empire didn't give up. They waited. They collected Otherworlders, fused magic with modern science, and built a mechanized military unlike anything this world has ever seen. Now, they are finally ready to march. Hey everyone! If you're enjoying our journey through Tensura, please take a second to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps support the channel and keeps these episodes coming. But while the Empire prepares its massive army, a different threat is already moving in the shadows. Let's get into it. The Eastern Empire, officially the Nazca Namrium Ulmuria United Eastern Empire, was one of the oldest nations in the world. As the story went, the foundations of its empire had already been laid nearly 2,000 years ago. Its roots reached back to the small kingdom of Nazca. Over many years, Nazca absorbed the magical kingdom of Namrius, then merged with the Eastern Federation of Ulmuria until the current empire took shape. Behind that conquest stood the overwhelming military power Nazca had cultivated. Now, under the name of the United Emperor Ludora Namul Nazca, the empire had enjoyed 2 millennia of rule without permitting any annexed nation to rebel. Every member nation existed as the empire's full vassal, subject to absolute imperial command. That was how the Nazca Namrium Ulmuria United Eastern Empire, generally called the Eastern Empire, operated. The empire's leader aimed for absolute dominance. That same belief lived in the unbroken imperial bloodline, where even the current emperor had been granted the name Ludora. Whatever the practical reality might have been, conventional wisdom held that the emperor always preferred absolute power. The military followed the same might makes right creed. Promotion was guaranteed to anyone who could prove their strength. And even now, rumor among imperial subjects said the only reason the empire had not plowed through the forest of Jura was simple: it was still not prepared. Approximately 350 years earlier, the empire had attempted to subdue Veldora the storm dragon. It failed, and the price was an entire city. That city had been one of the largest in the land, with a population of 100,000. It was a fortress city nestled against the eastern side of the forest of Jura, built over a full century as a beachhead for invasion. The empire meant to pass through the forest, expand its territory, and fulfill the emperor's will. The plan had been proceeding smoothly. The armies were gathered. The order to invade was given in the emperor's name. Then one squadron leader had a foolish idea. That officer reasoned that if they were passing through the forest of Jura anyway, they might as well tame its master. No giant lizard, he thought, could possibly threaten them. It was an incredibly ill-advised decision, and it led them all to destruction. What he and his troops actually did was never accurately recorded. Anyone who could have preserved the details was turned into ash. The empire's dream, the emperor's long-nursed ambition, burned to cinders with the city. That brought things to the present day. The empire spent centuries laying low, tending the wounds Veldora had carved into it. Trespassing into the forest of Jura remained forbidden, and the power the empire spent 350 years rebuilding simply waited for its chance to roar. The empire's political structure made that patience possible. Its administration and military were the two wings supporting the emperor's rule, and the emperor personally stood at the head of both. The administration had a House of Lords, populated by nobles with tremendous prestige on the surface. In reality, those nobles had no decision-making authority. They possessed vested interests and hereditary titles, but they mostly rubber-stamped the emperor's will. Imperial territory belonged to the emperor, who lent it to the nobility and allowed them to manage it, nothing more. The same logic governed the military. Since the emperor himself held authority over the armed forces, they functioned as his personal property. Even the regional cities annexed by the empire lived under that rule. Private property was seized, then lent back by imperial mercy. The defense forces protecting those lands were also on loan from the emperor. This policy crushed rebellion across the empire's outer regions. The empire accepted surrender, but surrender meant giving up every other right. Anyone who objected could expect a violent purge, thorough enough to make sure no one else entertained the same idea. That was how order had been maintained for generations. Terror beneath overwhelming military might, and guaranteed safety for those who became imperial subjects. The carrot and the stick were managed in equal measure. For a single person to rule a nation that vast should have been impossible. Yet across 2,000 years, the emperor's rule had never truly been questioned. Power always remained at the top. If one credited that entirely to the emperor, it would almost mean he was a god, something beyond the human realm. The empire's military force was broadly divided into 3 main divisions. The armored division was a force of mechanized soldiers managed by technicians. It possessed tanks and other modern weapons, making it the symbol of the empire's technological might. The magical beast division gathered beasts from across the world, both inside and outside imperial territory. Controlling those beasts and wielding their powers made the division a symbol of the empire's raw strength. The composite division was different. It collected off-spec mechanized soldiers, crazed magical beasts, and other irregular powers that could not function cleanly in ordinary group activity. They were self-focused and unstable, but together they formed a dangerous wild card. In that sense, they symbolized the empire's restless, youthful heart. Where the Western nations still relied mainly on swords and sorcery, the empire's fusion of magic and science made it a pioneer of a new era. Otherworlders played a mighty role in that expansion. One imperial subject had taken a particular interest in these visitors and the cosmic knowledge they brought with them. His name was Gadora, a great sorcerer who had served in the imperial palace for many years. Despite his wizened appearance, he was energetic, curious, and hungry for more than magical knowledge alone. Through the Otherworlders, Gadora learned about another world made of many countries, where people had found ways to cross differences in opinion and language. That world had no magic, and so it had evolved in a direction completely different from this one. Gadora himself had lived for a very long time. Whenever he approached the end of his natural life, he used his self-invented mysterious arts reincarnation to restore himself again and again. That allowed him to observe Otherworlders over many years, gather huge stores of knowledge, and even learn several languages from their world. Whenever a new Otherworlder appeared, Gadora had them brought to him and placed under his protection. The Empire collected more than magical beasts. It collected people, knowledge, skills, and ideas from beyond the world itself, and Gadora advocated for Otherworlders in the Imperial Court until he received permission to handle them as he wished. Otherworlders with special skills or knowledge were welcomed in the Empire, and their population far surpassed that of any other nation. The Empire's culture and military characteristics were heavily influenced by them. Many possessed unique skills, and the Empire researched those abilities with unmatched intensity. In the Empire, the profession of knight had become obsolete in most places. Fighting cavalry had given way to tactics built around modernized weaponry. Soldiers whose bodies had been mechanized were called Mechaknights, and they were treated as imperial battle stars. The armored division displayed those traits most clearly, but Otherworlder knowledge also shaped the magical beast division. Knowledge of DNA made it possible to analyze magical beasts on a scale no one had reached before, and that research branched out into still more fields. The composite division, meanwhile, housed a large number of powerful Otherworlders, each with their own unique skills. It would be foolish to deride their battle strength. Through unique skills, Otherworld technology, and Gadora's obsession, the Empire created an almost insurmountable military. It was no exaggeration to say that Gadora's passion had expanded the force's strength by itself. And above those 3 divisions stood a 4th force in all but name, the Imperial Guardians. They were a small paramilitary company of 100, charged with guarding the Emperor himself, and one of the few Imperial forces that still called its members knights. An uninformed observer might assume the custom was a relic of antiquity. It was not. The Imperial Knights were the best of the best, hand-picked from those who stood above the pack in each division. Some were Otherworlders, proving that the Empire did not discriminate by bloodline or birthplace when power was involved. To the end, the Empire's motto was might makes right. The Guardians were the clearest proof. They gained their positions through power, not inherited influence. Each member of the Imperial Guardians received legend-class weapons and armor. The best equipment in the hands of the best fighters created tremendous synergy, giving that team of 100 more pure fighting power than an entire division. They also received the best treatment in the Empire. Every one of them held high military status, and on special missions even the lowest of them carried at least the authority of an army colonel. They were the pride of the military, the greatest force in the Empire. So the Empire had in essence 4 military divisions. Each could only be led by someone whose talent was convincing enough to be recognized as the strongest. That recognition came through rank-based duels. Lower-ranking members could challenge their superiors under third-party arbitration. Rankings constantly shifted. There were conditions, of course. Duels were forbidden during military maneuvers, witnesses were required, and anyone who challenged and lost had to wait a year before trying again. If a challenger killed the opponent, the same delay applied. But the higher-ranked defender could kill a challenger without penalty, so this contest was not something anyone entered lightly. It was the ultimate expression of the Empire's creed: subjugate the opponent through overwhelming force. The Imperial Guardians constantly attracted would-be challengers, proving that this ideal had been etched into the hearts of Imperial subjects. Gadora did not quite belong to that hierarchy. He held a unique position, treated by the Empire almost as a non-Imperial stranger. Appointments to the Imperial Guardians were deliberated by a panel that did not include him, and each division commander was chosen from the Guardian roster. Whenever one stepped down, their replacement came from that group of 100. At the very top of the Guardians stood the Marshal. Below the Marshal were the 3 generals of the Guardians. The number 1 fighter became Marshal automatically, while the generals were named by a committee consisting of the Emperor, the current Marshal, and Gadora. Running a military force required more than brute strength, after all. To outside observers, the Marshal and the generals stood at the peak of the Empire. And if ordinary Imperial Guardians held Legend-class gear, this quartet naturally possessed something even better. God-class gear, the Empire's greatest hidden treasures, ancient weapons and armor once used to suppress other nations. To possess multiple pieces of semi-mythological equipment was to support the dignity of the Empire itself. These were items an average person would not even be allowed to touch. It was said that only when the gear accepted its wielder would it unleash its true force. The greatest power, supported by the ultimate equipment, that was the foundation stone of the Empire. And then, something changed. For the first time in decades, a commander lost a ranking challenge. With that loss came the colossal responsibility of keeping the disorganized composite division coherent. The commander had been felled by a man whose rise through the ranks was nothing short of historic. He had enlisted less than a year ago, then mowed down one experienced fighter after another without a single loss. Now that young man stood at one of the Empire's loftiest peaks. His name was Yuuki Kagurazaka, and with his rise, the pace of human events began to accelerate. 3 people stood in a lavishly decorated room, nervous and straight-backed as they waited for its owner. The man they awaited was Yuuki, the outsider who had come to the Empire and shot up to the rank of commander almost immediately. To them, Yuuki's story was no surprise. He was their boss, the leader of the secret society Cerberus. Yuuki finally entered with Kagali standing politely toward the rear like a secretary.
Hey, sorry to keep you waiting. You could have sat down, you know.
One of the visitors answered with stiff respect. Not at all, Sir Yuuki. We remain your faithful servants. You hardly need to be considerate of us. This was Damrada the Money, one of Cerberus's 3 boss-level officials, a hard man to grasp with a greasy, shady air about him. The other 2 were Misha the Lover, a beautiful woman with a strange presence that could seem both youthful and mature, and Vega the Power, whose supple, well-balanced, carnivore-like build dominated the eye. Together, they were the trio at the top of Cerberus's operations. They saluted Yuuki, then sat down. Damrada began the formal congratulations. First, let us congratulate you on reaching the rank of commander. Misha added, yes, as someone who survived an encounter with the Demon Lord Guy, I was sure you could do it, Sir Yuuki. Vega gave a dismissive snort. Let me at that force, and taking over a division would be child's play. Damrada and Misha had offered their good wishes. Vega at the end was not so impressed. Yuuki did not let it bother him. Yuuki's private verdict was colder. Vega really could be part of the 100, but after that, there was no way Vega could hold out, much less command anyone. Not a chance. Yuuki changed the subject.
Well, I have to thank you, Damrada, for intervening on my behalf with Lord Gadora.
Damrada waved the gratitude aside. Oh, don't be silly. It was all in anticipation of this moment, Sir Yuuki. All I did was introduce Lord Gadora to an Otherworlder you secured for us, so there is hardly any need to thank me that much.
You're always so stiff, Damrada. Why don't you just accept my gratitude for a change?
Damrada remained formal. I am afraid I cannot, sir. I do not want you to expect more from me than I can provide.
That's a funny joke.
Yuuki looked at Damrada and grinned, and that conveyed the point well enough. After many years, they trusted each other's abilities. Once the laughter passed, Yuuki moved to the main topic.
Now, Kagali, brief us on what the Demon Lord Rimuru is doing.
Kagali answered at once. Yes, Sir Yuuki. The Demon Lord Rimuru is currently... At Yuki's order, Kagali began her briefing. Her information mainly came from Free Guild members who had remained in the West. Most of Yuki's agents there had fled, but several used that retreat as cover to become underground spies. Kagali went over everything in a clear voice. Rimuru had total control over the Western nations and was using it to form an army of fearsome size, preparing for an Imperial invasion. She covered that, and more, along with strange phenomena occurring in Rimuru's capital city.
Oh? So they've designated the lodging town along the Great Ameld River as a military base? Yeah, if they're going to put defensive lines in their own nation, they'd have to do that, huh?
Kagali replied, Indeed, there are already nearly 20,000 troops stationed at that base. They are using something called magitrains for material transport, so they likely stored up enough food resources to survive a siege.
That's Tempest for you. The Empire's not gonna have an easy win there.
Kagali continued, I agree. They are importing food supplies from Farminus, so they have enough to feed a population of several million. The nation as a whole is far more powerful than it was a year ago, and I would say they could fight off the Empire all by themselves. Plus, the Council of the West is now entirely controlled by the Demon Lord Rimuru. If they can collate the West's forces into a cohesive whole, that would be substantial too.
You think so? I'm sure Rimuru tries to be thorough with everything, but he's pretty naive as far as I'm concerned. He probably figures that pitting numbers against numbers will just lead to more casualties, so I bet he wants to chase off the Empire with just his elite.
Kagali was taken aback. That's ridiculous. Damrada added his own doubt. I doubt someone like a demon lord would attempt something so foolish. They discounted the idea, but Yuki's mind did not change. He was convinced that Rimuru really was that naive, and that Rimuru's freakish strength might let him pull it off anyway. Despite his thoughts, Yuuki asked Kagali to keep going. Kagali resumed, Thank you. Continuing with the briefing, the capital of Rimuru has a force of over 50,000 on standby, and reinforcements are streaming in from the former Eurazania. Their total fighting power will likely surpass 100,000 in the end.
That's pretty amazing, but it still gives the Empire a big advantage.
Kagali gave her honest assessment. Certainly, the numbers don't compare. The Empire has over 1 million, and their foot soldiers have been undergoing some kind of strange modifications too. I think even the lowest infantry would rank at least a C, and consider all their bizarre armaments as well. Honestly, I don't think Tempest stands a chance. 100,000 trained soldiers with high morale was impressive. Normally, Tempest would deserve high praise, but against the Empire's full outfit, that number paled. Even Kagali's own defenses, back when she was the Demon Lord Kazalim, would not have held against the Empire's violent charge. Yuuki had different ideas.
I'll keep your advice in mind. Keep going.
Kagali moved on. Right. Now, moving on to their nation's technology. Tempest had suddenly begun selling a variety of curious goods, convenient tools, high-end weapons, and other effective gadgets. Many merchants wanted exclusive contracts with the developers, but no one had found where the goods were coming from. Their origins remained a mystery. Kagali reported, the magitrains I mentioned are another example, but as with the Empire, we are seeing a wave of technological innovation. Unfortunately, Tempest is preventing information leaks very thoroughly. The Free Guild members were not able to trace these goods back to their creators. They were probably being developed internally, that much was clear, but nobody knew where. It frustrated Kagali, but Yuuki could not send her out to deal with Rimuru herself. If she drew suspicion again, everything would be over. Then Kagali recalled something else. If you think about it, they must be developing new kinds of weapons too. Considering that, perhaps we should be concerned about more than the size of their army.
I thought you'd notice that. You're right, though. I was surprised to see the Empire developing tanks, but Rimuru's not far behind with his trains either. It's not like the Empire has an exclusive license for scientific weaponry, so it'd be stupid to look to that for an advantage.
The Empire was not the only side of this fight with Otherworlder technology. Rimuru retained memories from another world. There was no telling what kind of weapon he might decide to fund. If the Empire fought any normal nation, its mysterious firepower would shake that opponent to the core. But if the enemy possessed the technical skill to develop the same kinds of things, they would work out countermeasures quickly, and the advantage would disappear. Yuuki had seen that possibility, and by his estimate, Rimuru's chances of victory were not small. Vega cut in, frustrated. Ridiculous! Just crush them then. If you're that worried about that stuff, just tear it all down. Problem solved. To Vega, whether the enemy had a weapon or an army, all one needed to do was trample everything in the way. The observation revealed a critical lack of comprehension, and Yuuki rubbed a hand against his head. Yuuki thought that Vega was strong but painfully stupid. If there were even a little more intelligence there, that strength could be useful in so many more ways. Yuuki sighed before answering.
Well, if it comes to that, you can be sure I'll ask you for it. But we can't misread the enemy here.
That bit of ambivalence ought to have shut Vega up. In Yuuki's mind, quality counted for far more than quantity. No matter how large an army one assembled, it would never beat the Demon Lord guy. That alone proved that no one could dismiss the power of an individual. To reach a strategic goal, one had to master the information war and fully gauge the opponent's abilities. The easiest way was to throw someone decently strong against the foe and see what happened. Abandoning an unwinnable battle was also proper strategy. And even against a powerful individual, multiple simultaneous forces might overcome them. Overall war power was meaningless by itself. What mattered was tactical skill, how effectively each side could operate the forces it had. Along those lines, Tempest was troublesome. Rimuru was not the only threat. His nation had a ridiculous number of powerful magic-born. Even the Big Four, Benimaru, Diablo, Shion, and Gapta, were like 4 tactical units on their own. Defeating any one of them would be difficult. Yuuki thought that it was not just a matter of technology. Tempest had too many tough people on its side for sheer numbers to decide everything. In that sense, capitulating to Guy earlier had been the right call. As far as Yuuki knew, several people were stronger than Gapta, meaning at least a few others might rival the Big Four. Damrada muttered in agreement. My real concern is the magic-born comparable to saints or demon lords.
You're right, because it's not just the Big Four with them. There's magic-born like Geld and Gabiru as well. It's hard to understand why all these demon lord-class people keep coming over there.
The more Yuuki considered it, the stranger it seemed. Multiple people, each with strength on Clayman's level, were serving Rimuru, a single demon lord. If someone understood what that meant, they would almost wish it were a joke.
Lucky for us that the demon lord Rimuru isn't our enemy right now.
Everyone except Vega quietly nodded. Yuuki and his team now had a kind of agreement with Guy, placing them under his affiliation. Anyone who interfered with them would be inviting Guy's wrath. Since Yuuki had no interest in challenging Rimuru for the moment, they were under an armistice, more or less. Yuuki was selfish enough to use that situation as best he could. If he faced Rimuru someday, it would only be after he had regained his losses in the West. With that settled in his mind, he returned to the report.
Does that complete your report?
Kagali answered, We were not able to obtain detailed military information, so that is all the accurate intel we have. But there is one curious topic I would like to bring up.
What's that?
Kagali said in Rimuru's capital, there has been ongoing disaster training. But the local government recently added evacuation drills to the schedule. The earlier training had been sensible, running into sturdy buildings, putting out fires, and similar matters. But this new evacuation drill had citizens practicing fleeing into town from outside the 4 main gates. It made no sense. Yuuki sounded puzzled.
Fleeing into town?
Kagali replied, "Yes. Our investigators were not sure what it was about, so they split up and took a closer look."
One on the outside, one on the inside.
"Exactly," Kagali said. Then they saw something. A strange sight that looked like a dream. Misha leaned in. "A strange sight?" Kagali answered her. "Yes, Misha. There was an announcement, and exactly 10 minutes after that, the entire town vanished without a trace. All that remained was one single gate. According to the investigator outside, security personnel stayed by the gate and guided any stragglers into a nearby cave. Once the coast was clear, the investigator braced himself and passed through the gate, only to find himself inside a maze-like chamber of stone walls. He fled back out in a panic, proving that the gate worked both ways.
That might be their dungeon, I think.
Damrada asked, "Do you know what it is, Sir Yuuki?"
Yeah, I think Kagali knows too, but there's a tourist attraction in town called the Dungeon, right?
Kagali supplied the explanation. Correct. A structure with wandering monsters for adventurers to challenge themselves against.
It's probably that. I heard a rumor that there's a whole city inside that dungeon, so...
Damrada's disbelief came through clearly. A city inside it? Damrada was not ready to believe that, but Yuuki and Kagali were serious. It was difficult to explain to someone who did not already know, but that was the reality.
Yeah, it's a little crazy to think of normally, but... You know, it takes someone like Rimuru to make it possible. The dungeon goes down 100 floors, after all, and it's guarded by Veldora at the bottom.
Damrada questioned him, shaken. Is that really true?
Of course. I heard it from Veldora himself.
That shut Damrada up quickly. Kagali felt a little bad for him. She continued the line of thought. But if you think about it, it makes sense. Do you think this dungeon city might contain vital infrastructure for Tempest? Their technological development site, for example?
I see. I can believe it. In fact, it makes good sense.
There was no limit to what Rimuru would try. Yuuki no longer let it faze him. If anything, it excited him. The dungeon city was only a guess, but he doubted he was wrong. If it was Rimuru, Yuuki concluded, it had to be true. Misha asked the next question. What does this say about the war, then?
That I really don't know. I always thought you couldn't take those guys with a normal approach, but handling a city defense like that, I'm sure it's gonna shock the Empire.
Yuuki had assumed Rimuru would not fight the final battle on his own turf. He would never let his citizens become casualties. But if Rimuru had a surefire way to move every civilian out of harm's way, the enemy would have to rewrite its entire strategy.
Yeah, so maybe they're taking a wait-and-see approach with the lodging town to see if they wind up fighting there or not. Maybe they'll fight the real war around their capital. If the Empire forces miss the gate and pass right on by, there could be a surprise attack from the rear kind of thing.
Kagali followed the logic. And then the Western nation's army can pin them down from the front.
They could send an advance team to examine and analyze the Empire's fighting power. Then, while the Western nations and the Empire are fighting a war of attrition, they can take their time crafting a response.
Misha breathed out the conclusion. What a terrifying approach to think of. He really is a demon lord. Once Kagali, Damrada, and Misha understood Yuuki's thoughts, surprise showed on all of them. They knew conventional warfare would not be enough to stop Rimuru, but they had not thought that far. Imagining a fight against him gave them all headaches. And now, the fight between Rimuru and the Empire was starting to sound like a lot of fun to watch. Misha waited for the right moment, then asked, "So, Sir Yuuki, what's your next move?" Misha and her cohorts knew Yuuki had challenged the Demon Lord Guy and lost. They remained loyal, but they still were not sure what exactly he was thinking. The Cerberus trio was fine with the Empire giving Rimuru and his friends trouble, but they wanted to avoid playing a role in that war. Yuuki had promised Guy that he would not seriously support the Empire. Now that he was a commander, there was every reason to worry he might get caught in his own trap. For Cerberus, having an Imperial commander on their side was extremely attractive. It also carried the danger of being dragged into military affairs, and that was an eat-or-be-eaten world. One wrong move could annihilate them. Yuuki understood the motive behind Misha's question.
You don't have to worry. If Rimuru holds out for me, that suits all of us just fine. I mean, if we want to make our ideals a reality, the Empire gets in the way of that, don't they? I want to send them to their ruin someday, and not just because Guy told me to. And now that I'm a commander, I get to control the timing. Just think of it like that.
As one of the Empire's 3 top commanders, Yuuki knew its internal operations. That inside view of military strategy let him read the movements of Imperial forces and predict when defenses in Imperial territory would be thinnest. If the Western nations put up a serious fight, the Empire would have to deploy more firepower. Then, no matter how stout its defenses were, Yuuki was certain he would find an opening. Yuuki smacked the table for effect.
And we'll hit them where they're open.
Kagali smiled, still standing straight. Damrada and the others grew excited in their seats. Damrada asked, "Are you suggesting a coup?" Misha sounded delighted. "Ah, I love it. Now that's the Sir Yuuki I know." Vega laughed under his breath. "Sounds like a lot of fun. Empire Demon Lord? I'll crush them all." Vega was a little too excited, perhaps, but Yuuki decided not to worry about it as he returned to the point.
Well, that's my final goal anyway. Part of my promise with Guy was to stir up trouble with the Empire too, and I gotta live up to my end of it. I'm gonna mess around with the West too, but I don't think anyone's gonna complain about that, so...
Yuuki smiled warmly. Guy had not warned him against that, which meant Yuuki was free to do as he liked. Damrada inquired, "Are you talking about having the Empire fight the Western nations, then taking the Empire's head in the meantime?" Misha murmured. "Vicious as always, huh?"
Oh, not really. I think it's a plan pretty much anyone could come up with.
They might come up with it, but few would actually go through with it. Or they might try and lack the power and talent to make it happen. Yuuki was the exception.
Lord Gadora gave me a lot of information too. That old man loves anything novel, and he's got a flexible mind, but for some reason he just hates the Western nations, like to an obsessive level. It's a lot of the reason why he's developed all these weapons and contributed them to the Empire.
Damrada replied, "Ah yes, that is a famous story. Even I was aware of that."
Right? Because if he's looking for things that could crush the Empire's ambitions, you'd think he'd see the Demon Lord Rimuru as that. I'm sure it'll dawn on him once he starts messing with the guy.
Damrada asked quietly, "And then what will happen?"
Well, Lord Gadora has a ton of influence with the Imperial military, but in terms of actual power, he's got almost none. That's because he's more interested in revenge than anything. So if I can lead him the right way, I think I can pit him against Rimuru himself.
At the same time, Yuuki thought, he would like to have Gadora poke around for information about the dungeon. Damrada understood. This is your way to hassle Rimuru and weaken the Empire at the same time?
You got it.
Yuuki nodded briskly. He was not going to touch Rimuru himself, but if someone else wanted to challenge the Demon Lord, they were welcome to do it, hence all his conniving plans. He took that chance to explain further.
The way I see it, there are 3 people we need to watch out for in the Empire. One of them is Lord Gadora himself.
Gadora was a master sorcerer, a magic-born who had lived for many years. People saw him as a mystery figure who knew everything that went on behind the scenes in the Imperial capital. He was also a hero in his own right, one of the few survivors of the previous invasion attempt against Veldora. Behind Yuuki, Kagali asked, "Who are the other 2? Yuuki gave her a frustrated scowl.
Well, I don't know much about them yet exactly. That's why I know there's so much trouble.
Even with his extensive intelligence network, Yuuki had not found these 2. That alone showed how slippery they were. Misha suspected something. "Are they among the Imperial Guardians' upper ranks?" Yuuki gave a vague assent. There were rumors in military circles that certain Imperial Knights known as the Single Digits were even stronger than the 3 division commanders. In Yuki's opinion, those rumors were more than rumor. He could feel it. Yuuki was a full-fledged commander, but his numerical ranking remained in the double digits. He could challenge someone higher to a ranking duel, but first he would need to know who to challenge. Becoming a single digit required winning a battle staged in front of the Emperor, and even that fact was revealed only to those close to earning a shot.
I'm thinking that I can beat any single digit in the group, but I don't want to reveal my best moves in front of the enemy, so I haven't sent a request to the Emperor yet.
Yuuki had become a commander anyway thanks to lucky connections with Lord Gadora. Vega surprised them by making a good point. Thing is though, even if you try taking someone on, maybe the real boss will be someone else the whole time, huh? You can't be sure about anything. So what I guess I'm saying is, there are at least 9 people you gotta watch out for, sort of. Yuuki nodded.
Yeah, you're right. There's a chance my real nemesis is hidden among those 9. But I can't watch out for someone I've never seen before, you know? So right now, I'm looking closely at someone who's a more public figure than that.
Damrada asked, "Who?"
His name's Tatsuya Kondo. He runs the Imperial Information Bureau.
Damrada nodded. "Ah yes, he is hard to grasp, isn't he?" Misha added. "We know his name and face, but nothing else about him. It is bizarre." Tatsuya Kondo, as the name suggested, was an Otherworlder. Any personal information beyond that was a complete unknown. Rumors called him a mysterious figure stalking the halls of information. His rank was first lieutenant, but none of the unit commanders had the right to give him orders. The Imperial Information Bureau stood higher in the hierarchy than the military itself.
Yeah, it's freaky, isn't it? My guess is that he's one of the single digits, too.
Damrada said, "I see." Kagali agreed. "Put it that way and it makes sense." Damrada and Kagali nodded deeply. Misha considered it as well and raised no objection. Vega, already sounding disinterested, tried to hurry him along. "So who do you think the other one is?"
Patience, okay? The first thing is to meet up with this Tatsuya Kondo. I'll see if I can request a meeting with him. So as for the second person, she's also kinda a mystery.
Vega pressed. "What do you mean by that?"
Calm down, Vega.
Vega stiffened. Sorry." Yuki's warning had been warm, almost gentle, but it made Vega break into a nervous sweat. In that moment, the chasm between the two of them was obvious.
The second person is someone who sits next to the Emperor. I don't know who it is, but she has this incredible presence. I can feel her even with the Imperial set of blinds between us.
No one in the room had an answer. Nobody knew who she was. More accurately, nobody except Yuuki had even realized such a person existed. That made the danger painfully clear. Damrada spoke for the others. "So there is someone like that, always with the Emperor? I have not heard anything about it."
I didn't think so. She felt so present in the room, but nobody notices her at all. That has to be bad news.
The room fell silent for a moment. Damrada asked, still doubtful, "And you are sure she was there? I haven't even heard rumors of such a figure." Misha reasoned through it. "Look at it another way. If we heard that from anyone except Sir Yuuki, we never would have believed it, right?" Silence answered her. Yuuki smiled at his doubtful underlings.
It's no big deal. Just remember, if I attempt to stage a coup in the Empire, those 3 are probably gonna get in our way. I'll eliminate Lord Gadora first, so... Damrada, can you look into Tatsuya Kondo for me?
Damrada answered immediately. "Absolutely."
And Misha, keep up with your current mission.
Misha bowed her head. "Understood. I will continue engaging the commander of the armored division." Vega asked, "What about me?"
You're going to go undercover in the Magical Beast Division. With your muscle, you'll get into the Imperial Guardians in a flash. But whatever you do, don't kill the division commander, alright?
Vega flashed a ferocious smile, pleased to finally be on duty. "Sure, I'll try not to." Yuuki wondered whether Vega would really be alright, but decided to trust the mission for now. If a division leader actually got killed, that would delay the Empire's entire military operation, which was a concern. But Yuuki chose not to worry about it unless it happened. The 3 heads of Cerberus left the chamber, leaving Yuuki alone with Kagali. Kagali asked, "Sir Yuuki, do you think they will all pull it off?"
Who knows? I thought I was being pretty careful, and then I caught a tiger named Guy by the tail. I'm not in any position to say this, but I sure hope they can.
Damrada was off investigating Tatsuya Kondo. Misha would keep cultivating her own commander contact. Vega had been sent into an Imperial division with orders to climb fast without wrecking the plan. These were dangerous missions and they were all being done for Yuki's sake. As their leader, he had to trust in their success. Kagali said, "But we finally made it to this point, haven't we? The battle is about to begin."
It sure is. It'll be fun to see who wins.
Kagali chided him. "As if you can just sit back and watch. Even if you pull off that coup, the hard part comes after that."
Yeah, I have Laplace and the gang working on that for me. I got everything covered.
The two shared a smile. Their mission was not to have the Empire win. The longer they could drag out the coming war, the weaker the Empire would become. That was what they wanted, and the fate of Yuki and Kagali's plans depended on whether the ensuing coup succeeded or failed.
First, we make the Emperor our puppet and establish a new empire. Then,
Kagali completed the next step. "Why don't we forge a peace treaty with the Western nations?"
and then,
Kagali's answer was cold. "We'll have the Emperor assassinated." If the Demon Lord Rimuru proved too hard to kill, there was no need to force it. Guy had defeated Yuki fairly, and Yuki had given up on conquering the world in the short to midterm. Until he obtained the absolute power he needed, he understood that trying to get his way through violence alone was folly. For now, he needed to add more winning cards to his hand. And if the war kept raging, if more blood could be shed, Kagali understood what that meant. "Then I will awaken to a true Demon Lord once more."
that's what I'm hoping to hear from you, Kagali. And by then, I ought to be able to fully use all the new powers I got.
Yuki had awakened an ultimate skill. Already he could feel his lifespan extending. And now he knew the truth. There were people greater than him. People like the Demon Lord Guy, who ruled the world with absolute force. Conquering the world without accounting for them would be a fantasy. For now, the best path was to slip under Guy's radar and build his strength. Yuki would stir up the Empire, keep the war going, and weaken both East and West. Once pessimism settled in, once everyone was weary of war, if Yuki could use that moment to assassinate the Emperor, the world would fall into an even more appalling age of chaos. He and Kagali could ride that chaos and awaken still more within themselves. That, in essence, was the plan.
Well, keep being careful, though.
Kagali answered with the same caution. "Of course, Sir Yuki. You keep being careful, too." Once more, they looked at each other and smiled. Even two intelligent schemers like them did not see the dungeon as a very important factor. They saw it as a clever way for Tempest to hide top-secret facilities, maybe even a whole town, and they thought bringing it to Lord Gadora's attention would be a useful way to drive Rimuru into trouble. They might visit it someday themselves, so they decided it was worth having someone check it for clues on how to crack it. But neither Yuki nor Kagali spent much time thinking about it. Thanks to that, when their dungeon runners returned with a rather unexpected report, Yuki paid it no mind.
Route confirmed. The next episode and full playlist are ready.
Then don't stop here. Keep watching in story order and subscribe before the next part drops.